Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. Not that I can see you, but I can tell some of you are out there because the counter keeps going up and it says that there's people watching. So glad to have you all here. Welcome once again to our weekly Wednesday night webinar brought to you by OCD. OCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Free download, by the way. Check it out. And on there, you can utilize our therapy tools, join our community, the largest community of people with OCD in the world, by the way. And there's also lots of other fun and exciting things that are going on as well too, like teletherapy. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you've checked us out at NoCD, and we continue to do teletherapy across the globe. So if you're interested, please check us out, and we want to help. So if you're here in the US, we even get more and more insurance companies covering us all the time as well too. All right. Check us out at nocd.com or download that app. Let's see. I'm going to use the German pronunciation for Imella. Your intrusive thoughts are making you depressed because they're telling you have to act on it, your harm OCD. And then you're like, what's the point of even doing anything in my life if I'm just going to act this out? Even though I don't want to act on it, my brain tells me there's no other option, and I'm so stressed about it every day. I'm scared I will get worse until eventually I go crazy. I feel like my brain is too messed up at this point, and I can never go back to how I used to be. Okay. Well, that's a great description of what OCD is right there for everybody listening. When there's this notion that, well, I just have to do it, right? I would ask why, right? I mean, every day when I was going back to the hospital, I would think about pushing people down the staircase. And I'm wondering then, should I have despaired and should I have eventually just done it? Since I was thinking about it. Now, the reason I was thinking about it was because I've treated enough people with that fear that just became something that now whenever I'm on a staircase, I contemplate throwing people downstairs all the time. And I take stairs every day. Even just to get down here, I take stairs. So if there's someone on a staircase and I think about it long enough, am I required then to push somebody down the stairs? Now, what you say here is that your brain tells you there's no other option. I'm going to disagree with that. Your OCD tells you that there's no other option. And you're stressed about it every day, and you think that you're going to get worse every day until you go crazy. What proof do you have of that is what I would like to know. What proof do you have that one day this is going to get so bad that you are going to go crazy? If you could share the proof that that is going to happen, I'd like to see it. Otherwise, we're dealing with a what if here, right? And for any of you who've listened to this webinar, you have heard me talk about the phrase what if, but we will talk about it again here. The biggest enemy that I deal with on a daily basis is what if. And what if is always followed by the worst case scenario, right? I've never once treated anyone for what if everybody loves me and thinks I'm awesome. That's not why people come to therapy. It is all sorts of what ifs followed by worst case scenarios that people are stuck in, right? So that's what we're dealing with here, right? We are seeing people stuck. Imella, you're stuck in this what if I eventually go crazy? What if my brain becomes too messed up and I can never go back to how I used to be? But I would ask, if you're doing treatment, and if you're not, this is exactly where a well-trained OCD and ERP therapist could really help you to deal with these concerns that you're describing here, because I haven't met someone yet who has had a brain that is too messed up, who can't go back to feeling the way that they want to feel. I just haven't seen that yet, right? So I have no proof that that would be true, right? That would happen to you. I know that your OCD will tell you that that could happen, right? I know that your OCD wants you to believe that, because your OCD will do anything that it possibly can to get you to do more compulsions. So, Imela, if your OCD has tricked you into this and has told you this and has then led you down a path of, and the only way to make sure that this doesn't happen, that you don't go crazy, that you don't get so stressed out every day, that you don't get worse, is to do compulsions, then that's what's going to happen. You're just going to continue to do more and more compulsions. And then what does that do? Well, that feeds the OCD, because as we've talked about, OCD eats one food. OCD is the koala bear of disorders. Koalas eat one thing, which is eucalyptus leaves, and OCD eats one thing, which is compulsions. So the more compulsions you do, number one, the better you feel in the moment when you do them. Number two, when the thing you're afraid of doesn't happen, the more you use that as proof that that's the reason why the thing hasn't happened, is because I did a compulsion. And number three, the more stuck you become. So this is where it's really important, I would say, to get with a therapist who can really walk you through these types of things, and to recognize that, whatever it is that pops in your head, and just because something as part of your OCD might be telling you that you have to do something, doesn't actually mean that you have to listen to it. Otherwise, as one of our listeners once said about a year ago, we're either the largest gathering tonight of murderers, rapists, pedophiles, degenerates, and awful, horrible people, or we're a large group of people who have obsessive compulsive disorder and who are afraid of, what if we were all to become those very things that we are afraid of. OCD does not make you into something, right? Otherwise, we would see all the time, yes, there's a lot of gang murders in Chicago. And do you know why all those murders occurred? Because all of those gang members have OCD, and their OCD told them to shoot people. Well, we're not seeing that. That's not coming out in court. That's not coming out in medical exams. That's not coming out in news reports or anything of that nature. That's just not the evidence that we are seeing. But it is the evidence that OCD wants you to believe, right? OCD wants you to believe that if you don't do everything it says, you will become the very thing that it's trying to protect you from becoming. As if OCD holds a medical or a magical kind of hold, a magical gate, even, shall we say, to block these very things from happening. And if you give up on the OCD, the gate will fall, and unleashed will become horrors and terrors and all sorts of awful and horrible things upon the world through you. And it is only by the grace of your OCD that you have managed to hold it back. Well, that's a lie. That is a standard OCD lie that it wants you to hold on to. It wants you to believe. And I just call bull on it, right? Because if that's the case, then I haven't spent my career treating people with OCD. I've spent my entire career trying to prevent people from doing awful, horrible things, which to me isn't what I've spent my career doing. I've spent my career trying to show people that just because OCD is going on in the brain doesn't mean that anybody has to listen to it or believe in it or follow it. That's what I think my career is. Now, maybe I'm delusional, right? Maybe I'm totally wrong. And maybe I've been fooled this entire 22 years of treating obsessive compulsive disorder. But I just see no evidence of that fact. What I see is evidence of people who go through treatment, who at the end of treatment say, I can't believe I used to believe that. I can't believe I wasted that much of my life on that. I now know when that thought pops into my head or that image or that urge is there, that I don't have to do anything about it, that I can let it go, I can let it be, that I can live with having obsessive compulsive disorder. And obsessive compulsive disorder doesn't have to define me as a person, right? I'm going to define who I am as a person. Now, part of the definition of who I am as a person might be that I also have obsessive compulsive disorder, but I'm the kind of person who's learned that I can handle that OCD and that I don't need to be afraid of having it, and that it doesn't mean that I am one step away from becoming an awful or horrible person, because that's not what OCD protects against. OCD protects against a feared idea, a feared image, a feared urge. It doesn't protect against reality. And what's the reality? The reality is I have OCD. That's the reality. I hope that helps. Deadpool Gaming says, I have death OCD after witnessing your father die in front of you. Sorry to have that happen. And you constantly worry and obsess about dying or losing a loved one. You try to keep your faith, you're horrified about it, and you don't know what to do. Well, again, first of all, Deadpool Gaming, sorry that would have happened to you. That's an unfortunate experience. But we also kind of know the reality that as much as we might obsess about dying or losing loved ones or something like that, those things just happen. They are a natural part of life. No one has ever lived forever, and all of us will not be here one day. So this is one of those futile OCD experiences, in a way where OCD is trying to convince you that if you do these certain compulsions, you can prevent death, right? You can stop death from happening. You can be in control of death, right? Now, I once worked with someone who had this very kind of concern, and they thought that if they thought about their parents dying, then they had to do a prayer afterwards. And if they didn't do a prayer, that their parents would die, and then it would be their fault. So I wrote on a card in my wallet, and I will bring that card to the OCD Foundation. So if any of you go to the conference, please feel free to come up to me and ask me to see the card. And the card has now, for over 17 years, said on it, I hope my parents die tonight, please God. And there's a 666 on the card as well, too. And my parents are still alive at this point. So I'm either awful at OCD, or I could write that down, never having done a ritual or a compulsion to neutralize it anyway, and just allowed it to be there, and recognize that just because that is there in a written format does not make anything happen or cause anything to become true. Now, will my parents die one day? Yes, they will. That is going to happen. That is one thing I have 100% confidence in, right? That I am not going to be here one day, and that they are not going to be here one day. So that is one of the rarities of anything, and I don't give 100% to anything, but that would be one that I would give 100% to, that there's going to come a day where I'm not going to be around anymore. Would any compulsion prevent that from happening? Would there be anything that I could do to stop it? And though none of us necessarily want that, we don't want anyone to die. We don't want to die ourselves. I understand that. Do we, though, have to be afraid of it? We could not want something, but also not have to fear it, right? Because I wonder if fear of the inevitable is really worth the fear, right? I would work with people more on acceptance of the fact. I could spend the rest of my life sitting next to my tombstone, wondering when I'm going to be 6 feet under it. Or I could spend the rest of my life living the life in the way that I hope to live it. And upon the day of my death, arrive at my tombstone, hopefully saying, man, that was a good ride. Now that's what I would prefer, right? That's where I'd like to go with it. But I think there's a lot of people who, metaphorically speaking, sit next to their tombstone worrying about when they're going to be under it. And they aren't living the life that they could be living because they're only worrying about when they're not going to be able to live it. Let me take another example. I've worked with people who have OCD who have so much fear of waking up in the middle of the night because they might have to go to the bathroom that they stay up all night long trying to go to the bathroom to make sure that they have no urine left in them, so that then if they do go to sleep, then they'll be able to sleep soundly. But because they're up all night trying to push all of the urine out, they don't actually sleep. And therefore, because they don't actually sleep, they created the very thing that they were afraid of, having a restless night. They'd have been far better off going to sleep, and then if they had to pee, just getting up and going to pee and then going back to bed, than they would have had they stayed up all night trying to push all of the urine out of them to make sure that they didn't have any, so that if they do go to sleep, then they would be able to sleep soundly. Now, that's the illogic of OCD, right? And when we're talking about the illogic of OCD, it says to you, hey, getting up in the middle of the night would be horrible. That would just be awful. You better stay up and just make sure there's no pee left in you. I mean, look at that other guy over there. They're sleeping. They might have to wake up and go to the bathroom. But what if they did and they peed and they went right back to bed? That's a possibility, right? So OCD tells us things are so bad and awful and horrible, and yet they're not as bad as OCD makes them out to be. We don't have to like them. We don't have to be comfortable with them. But the level of fear that OCD throws onto something is above and beyond what is helpful or is allowing for us to get through life in a way that has meaning and integrity and everything else. So you ask at the end there, Deadpool Gaming, when you say you don't know what to do with a question mark, I would work on acceptance of the fact that the things that you are afraid of, though they will happen, don't have to interfere with the rest of your life. And though you unfortunately witnessed your father dying, I don't think your dad, and excuse me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but I don't think your dad would want you to spend the rest of your life with that image in your head, fearing it. I would hope that he would want you to go on and to challenge the OCD and live the life that you would want to live and that you're hopefully meant to live, so that you could get the most out of life that you possibly could. That would be my thought. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that, though, everyone. US says, if you do ERP to habituate and your fears actually get realized, won't that just reinforce OCD patterns more and OCD get much worse, as you now have real proof that it was worth doing the compulsions? So someday the ceiling above me is going to collapse, right? Whether I do compulsions or not. If I lived for the next 1,000 years, right, there would be a point where this ceiling above me would likely collapse. Plasterboard, I don't think, is going to last for 1,000 years. I just have a feeling that that's the case. And heck, who knows what's going to happen within 1,000 years from now? Who knows? I could do compulsions for the next 1,000 years, and that would happen. I could not do compulsions for the next 1,000 years, and that could happen. So I don't use the fact that something occurs as proof that OCD was worth it. Will things happen now and then? Of course, right? Does OCD put a stop to them? No. But when we do something and then something doesn't happen, what do we make an assumption? Here's again the illogic of OCD. We say to ourselves, oh, well, I know why that didn't happen. It's because I did a compulsion. See, it's a good thing to do compulsion. US, if that's the case, then everyone in the world, as long as they did compulsions every day, no one in the world would ever have anything bad happen to them ever again. So, US, you might solve the problem we were discussing above. No one would ever die. No one would ever be hurt. No one would ever be hungry. Everybody would be guaranteed all sorts of things because the compulsions would give us those absolute 100% guarantees. There would never be any doubts about anything ever in the world, and all would be well. And yet, I see people consistently doing compulsions who never achieve that. They still have doubts, and things still happen to them. So, US, then I'll ask this. Let's say that you were still doing the compulsions and something happened. Would you then use that as proof that OCD is bull? Or would you probably, I'm going to bet I know what you would do. You would probably say, oh, I must not have done my compulsion enough because if I had, then that wouldn't have happened. OCD wins all the time, right? When you do what OCD wants you to do and something doesn't happen, it's because of the OCD and the compulsion. When you do what OCD wants you to do and something bad does happen, it's because you didn't do the compulsion well enough. If you don't do what the OCD wants you to do and something doesn't happen, it was luck. And if you don't do what the OCD wants you to do and something bad happens, it's because you didn't follow the rules of OCD. OCD wins every time. Now, the only way to beat OCD is not to go up against it like this. It's to recognize, I don't need to fight OCD. I just need to move on from it. That would be the best. Trisha says, hi, Doc. I was wondering if you have any thoughts about using EMDR for treating OCD. You've been reading a lot about it lately. Thank you. I don't know that EMDR yet is listed as one of the empirically validated treatments for OCD. So I personally limit my treatments to things that have been listed as empirically validated and also have peer-reviewed studies on the treatment of anything as well too. So that's the area that I would go and look at before I would choose to do any treatment other than ERP at this point in time. Lasha says, hi, Doc. I'm finding it hard to move forward with exposures for contamination obsessions with COVID cases on the rise. Any tips? Well, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Obviously, with COVID on the rise, we have recommendations to follow for the CDC, right? So vaccinations and wash your hands when you get home and wear a mask when you go out. And I don't have OCD, but I do those things, right? I follow those guidelines and I think that they make sound scientific sense. Outside of the guidelines, if you're doing more than that, is the realm of obsessive compulsive disorder. So what I always get across to people is once you go beyond the recommendations, you're entering the realm of what OCD wants you to do. Therefore, if you want to work on decreasing the impact of OCD, we follow the guidelines and we don't go above them, right? So if it's a 20-second hand wash, we don't do 40 seconds just because, hey, twice the amount might be even better, right? We follow the guidelines. Now, in a surge like this, where we're having surges of COVID, yeah, even for me, right? I go out less these days than I would normally, right? It also helps that it's like -9 here where I live. So who wants to go out anyway in that kind of situation? But, you know, I think there's a healthy level of caution to be had in times like this when we're seeing a surge in something, right? So I'm not going to tell you, oh my God, that's OCD, that's OCD, oh, kind of stuff. If you've decided, you know what, instead of going grocery shopping 3 times a week like I normally do, I might just go once and get everything. And that way I have less contact with folks, at least for the next, couple of weeks. Okay, cool. But when the surge starts going down, then can we go back to regular old routines and doing things that you used to do when doing those didn't cause any problems? Let's go back to that. I mean, I think that we have to look at it kind of with a healthy level of judgment here in these types of situations. And so that's where my work would be with people is how do we make this work the best, right? And how do we not let OCD influence the decisions, but how do we make decisions based on data and recommendations of experts and kind of follow along with those? That's how I look at it. Callie says, my harm OCD keeps telling me, well, you can do this, and it's making my intrusive thought and urges stronger and making you feel like you desire these thoughts and that you're actually this very bad person. Why? Well, again, Callie, like we talked about a little bit earlier, and this kind of goes along with that, OCD, of course, wants you to believe that you're a bad person because OCD says, you know what? I have the cure for bad people. And you know what the cure for bad people is? Compulsions. Compulsions are the cure for bad people. You, Callie, look at how awful and horrible and dreadful and everything you are, Callie. But you know what, Callie? I've got the answer for you. Callie, I've got the way out for you. Callie, can help you. And you know I'm going to help you, Callie? I'm going to have you do compulsions. And Callie, when you do compulsions, you will realize how much better life is. What a wonderful thing compulsions are, to give you the ability to guarantee that nothing bad will ever happen and that you'll never get sick and no one will ever die and all will go well, and salvation is guaranteed for everyone, and children can play freely without any worry about anybody doing anything untoward to them, and no one will ever run anyone over with their car, and all will just be great, Callie, as long as we do compulsion. And that's the lie. That's the trick of OCD. OCD is a great salesman, right? Callie, I've got a guarantee for you, Callie. Here it is. Life can be great if you do everything I tell you to do. You'll have the best life ever in the world as long as you just do everything I tell you to do and do these compulsions that I ask you to do. All will be well. Nothing bad will ever happen ever again. Doesn't that sound great, Callie? Let's go for it, Callie. Come on, Callie. What do you say? What do you say? Huh? Doesn't that sound awesome? Let's do it, Callie. Look, it's simple. Just buy into this. It's great. It's awesome. That's all you got to do. Sign this pact with me, right? Doesn't work. And actually, people with OCD will tell you that they're more miserable with their OCD than they are without it. But they're tricked into using it because there's the belief that this next time might be the one that finally solves all the problems and makes everything bad go away. One more compulsion, that's all that's needed. Finally, I'll have done enough. Again, it's all a lie. But we fall for it. And that's part of my job, is to help people see that you don't need to fall for that. Okay? That's not what we want. Natural B says, is it normal to feel like your thoughts? When you have OCD, it's absolutely normal, right? Sure. We see it all the time. And those are those what ifs, for sure. Boyce says, hey, Doc, been doing better with ERP and giving no value to your fears and thoughts. Wonderful. What frustrates you is that it has been weeks and you still have these existential intrusive thoughts at some point. Advice? Boyce, if you've had OCD for years, might it take a while for these things to eventually just fade into the background without requiring all that much attention? And remember, boys, just because the thoughts are there doesn't mean that you have to do anything about them. And the more that you allow yourself to recognize that these can be there without having to do anything about them, the better you will start to feel. So that's what I want you to recognize, boys, is that, okay? It is okay if existential intrusive thoughts are there at some point. They happen. But just because they're there doesn't have to mean anything whatsoever. And that's where I really want you to go with it, is that. Okay. Don't look at it as therapy is failing because you still have intrusive thoughts. Because I'm going to give all of you with OCD a little secret. Even people without OCD have intrusive thoughts, images, and urges all the time. It is not getting you to a point of living life without intrusive thoughts, images, or urges. It's about getting you to living life recognizing that you can handle having thoughts, images, and urges. And that's the goal. Jamie 007 says hello. Hi, hey, Jamie. Precipitating relaxation. I like that. You're wondering how to tell the difference between relationship OCD versus the relationship just plain not working. Great question. So if you keep going over the same thing over and over again and find that there's compulsions that you have to do and seekings of reassurance that you do, and then you might even get advice from people or something like that, all those things might be the same thing that you would do at the beginning of doubts about relationship or something like that. But when it comes to the point of indecisiveness and where you keep doing the same things over and over again, and you keep doing the same compulsions over and over again, and you keep throwing in doubts about things, even at reassurance, maybe from your spouse or something like that, to the point that there is no answer that will satisfy you, then you might be looking at, a bit of the OCD coming through in those types of situations. So I'd have to say precipitating. Is there an answer that you're looking for? And is it impossible to get? Sounds like OCD. Is there an answer that only this answer would be the acceptable answer and everything else is wrong? And that answer is probably the worst case scenario? Sounds like OCD. And can you sit with the discomfort and recognize that, I don't have to have 100% guarantee about my partner. I don't have to have 100% love for them. I don't have to be 100% attracted to them. And I don't have to be 100% liking of them at all the time to still love them and want to be with them and to create a relationship with them. Because OCD would say, well, that's wrong. That's just stupid. That's dumb. The only way to have a relationship with someone is to be 100% into them and have a guarantee that they're 100% into you, and to be 100% attracted to them at all times, and to be 100% in love with them at all times, and to 100% like them at all times too. Anything less than that, get out. Horrible, awful, and go find that soulmate of yours. OCD loves a soulmate. I think soulmate's a ridiculous concept, but OCD loves a soulmate, right? And this mythical being is out there that is 100% matched perfect to perfect for you at all times, and they will never piss you off. They will always chew with their mouth closed. They will never scrape the fork on their teeth, and when they sneeze it will go instead of making a loud noise or something like that. I mean, it's just dumb, right? But OCD is dumb, so OCD wants you to believe that all of these fairy tale types of things are actually true and real and attainable and everything of that nature. Hopefully, you recognize you don't have to have that in order to be okay in a relationship. Michelle says, what's your thoughts on OCD? Well, I hate it. And maybe having ADD. My mind is always racing. When it's quiet up there, I have no intrusive thoughts. So one of the things we know that people with attention deficit disorder, when they get medicated for it, often report a worsening of OCD, because the stimulant medications that calm you down for ADD are often a source of fuel for the obsessive compulsive disorder. So that's one thing to pay attention to. When it's quiet up there, well, there are points where people with OCD experience quiet too, even though the rest of the time they might experience a lot of intrusive and racing types of thoughts. So, Michelle, what I would do is I would get with a therapist who can do a good diagnostic interview for the two of these things, and to really let you know what's going on, and then develop a treatment plan around those specific issues that are coming up. And I hope that that will be helpful. Your Majesty says, oh, hello, Your Majesty. I have OCD that causes me to do medication seeking. Is this common? What to do? If there's a point of doubting every medication that you're on or seeking about all the side effects and all those kinds of things, I think that what you will find is that OCD can cause doubts about all of those kinds of areas, right? So there's probably never going to be a good enough medication for OCD, right? We're not at a point of having medications on the psychiatric side that really cure things at this point in time. We do have medications that can be good and helpful in managing things, but OCD might say, well, managing's not good enough. If you want to get rid of me, you got to cure me. And this is when OCD takes over OCD treatment. Okay, fine. You want to get rid of me. Well, I'll help you figure out a way to do that. We have to just do it perfectly, which means you're never going to do it and OCD is going to be there forever. So I would hope that you recognize that it's not going to be all about medication. In fact, the American Psychiatric Association says the treatment of choice for OCD is exposure and response prevention therapy or exposure and response prevention therapy plus medication. The APA, American Psychiatric Association, does not suggest that only medications are the treatment for OCD. You have to add the therapy to it as well too. So you're never going to find the perfect medication for OCD, but you're not supposed to either because it doesn't exist. You're going to find the medication that seems to help you the most and works well in conjunction with the therapy that you're doing to get you to a point that you're able to recognize the influence of OCD in your life and not be overwhelmed by it. And that's where we want to go. Ipshita says, want to thank you, doctor, for your previous helpful and wonderful advice. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You're improving day by day. Hopefully it will be totally cured soon. Well, we can all hope that that would be the case. I personally never talk about cured OCD. I talk about I've learned to live with the fact that I have OCD, and I've learned to recognize the intrusive thoughts, images, and urges, and I know that I don't have to give anything to it whatsoever. Jayadeep says, with my ROCD, you feel like you're forcing yourself to love her and it feels like a job. You saw someone say that it isn't OCD. Do I just keep pushing through this and blaming it on OCD? Jayadeep, I'm going to go with one part of this that you might not have thought I would go with, but I love when people say this. I saw someone say this isn't OCD. 99 doctors told me that I was fine. And one doctor said, well, maybe there's slightly something, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. Well, that's the only doctor that's telling the truth right there. All those other ones are obviously liars. All we need is for one person to say something or write something, and it means this. I see this all the time on message boards and everything. People will be going onto message boards to find out, hey, I just had this thought. Do you all think it's OCD? And thousands of people say, oh, it sounds like OCD, sounds like OCD. And then there's one troll on there that goes, nope, that's real. And then that person comes to my next session and says, oh my God, someone said that thought was real. Now what if it is? And oh, my life's over and all these kinds of things. Who said it? Well, I don't know. It was someone on a message board. How do you know that they're legit? Well, I don't know, but what if they are? And what if? And what if? And what if? And what if? And that's where people get overwhelmed, right? That's where people rely on the proverbial they. I also love they. I don't know who they are, but I get this all the time. Well, they said, or they wrote on the internet. Okay, great. Who's they? Can one person tell me who they are? That's all I want. I want one person to tell me who they are. I don't know who they are. Do you know who they are? No. Why are we believing they if we don't even know who the hell they are? Right? So, Jayadeep, sure, you saw someone say this is an OCD, but just because they said that doesn't mean it's true. But your OCD will go, ha ha! Look at that. What if they are right? Better do more compulsions. Right? And it's funny here because you're basically saying, how do I answer this might not be OCD? With more OCD. That's how I answer this might not be OCD. Which is ridiculous, of course, if you think about it logically. But emotionally, who cares what logic says? Let's throw logic out the window. Emotionally, I'm afraid of it, and I better do everything that my OCD wants me to do. So, yeah, your ROCD may make you feel like you're forcing yourself to love someone, right? It could be that. But is it even having to blame the OCD? Or is it recognizing that working with her and a therapist that just because that's my initial first thought doesn't mean that that might be my second thought or my third thought. And maybe I just have to learn to recognize that OCD owns the first thought, but I can own all the thoughts after that. That original first thought, bam, worst case scenario, OCD. All the thoughts after that, though, whatever I want them to be. Or maybe lesser ones, or ones that don't have so much bite. And maybe those are more true and more real. Why do I have to trust the first thought that comes into my head? Right? If I'm out somewhere and someone pushes my friend and my first thought is to hit them, just because it is doesn't mean that I have to do it. And I don't, right? My second thought might be, hold on, maybe my friend bumped into them first or did something to them that I didn't see, which for one of my friends is a possibility. So maybe it's better for me to recognize that just because I have an initial thought doesn't mean that I have to follow it, that I have to believe it, that I have to do what it says. I can spend some time and energy getting some information and trying to figure some things out. Maybe that would be the wise thing to do. Instead of, well, that popped in my head, it must be true and real, now I have to go along with it. No, that's not the case. That's just not the way that it is. It's not what I have to do. Guy said you got your 15-minute info call with No CD booked. Yay! Congratulations. Glad to have you. Jammy07 says, can you explain, 007, a little bit about OCD staring, specifically about staring at genital areas? Is there any recovery from this? In a recent IOCDF, hold on, I think I even saved it. So let me, if you don't mind one moment, everyone, while I search my computer, I just want to see if I saved this article. Not there. Maybe it's over here. Hold on. Give me one more moment, everybody, and let me just see if I still have that. I may not. I may not. Let me see. There it is. All right. I got that. Let me pull this over here, and there all of you. So John Grayson and Melissa Price wrote a article in a recent OCD newsletter. It's called Ocular Territic OCD, formerly known as OCD staring, is a form of OCD where sufferers repeatedly stare at objects in the periphery of their vision or at socially inappropriate parts of other people's bodies. They may find they are unable to look away even though they want to, and may ruminate about potentially negative social results of staring. Ocular Territic OCD has received little attention from researchers and clinicians, as not much is known about it. Dr. Grayson and Melissa Price hope to change that. They're sharing a short survey that Melissa created for sufferers of ocular Territic OCD, and they asked people to fill it out. So I'm going to put the survey right here in the link, iocdf.org/staring survey. Okay. There we go. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I think I might have put let me change that. IOC. It helps to type things, right? IOCDF.org. Okay. IOCDF.org/staring survey. I'll read a little bit more about it. Some people with OTO are hyper aware of people in the periphery of their vision. Other groups fear they are staring at people inappropriately, including repeatedly looking at people's private areas in a way that feels out of their control. A subset believe they are staring at others, but they are actually not staring. Another group does stare, and their behaviors are recognized by others. As OTO takes hold, many sufferers will begin to avoid social situations, losing employment opportunities, and even cutting off contact with friends or family members. Some sufferers may be fired from their jobs, ostracized in their communities. In extreme cases, they can become reclusive. There's not a lot of research on this, but sufferers are very often willing to discuss it as well, even with their therapists. So we're trying to get some info out there about it. Now, here's what I would say is, A, are you actually staring, or does your OCD tell you are? It's hard to tell, right? And without seeing you here, it's hard to say anything about that as well, too. B, is looking around a room and seeing a body mean that you're staring at genitals? Well, you could be hyper aware of the fact that the person has genitals and maybe think that you're looking at them, but we don't know that that's actually the case or not, too. I would say, Jamie, this is really worth discussing with a therapist because there's a lot of ways that this could be occurring. And it would really behoove you to work with someone so that you don't get to a point where you do see that it starts to interfere with your life socially or things of that nature. And I hope that that survey is helpful to all of you as well, too, if you have questions about OCD staring, which now, again, ocular territic OCD. Nicole says, hi, you've been having terrible intrusive thoughts that have come into your dreams. You wake up filled with anxiety over it. Is it common? It can be. And here's what I would ask you to do. I would ask you, Nicole, to purposely do ERP to the themes of your dreams while you're awake so that you can reduce the fear of them while you're awake. And I believe that you will also see that they don't bother you so much while you're sleeping as well, too. So anytime somebody reports to me that this has happened, I use those as part of my ERP exercises that I do with my patients to make sure that they are working on those things. And then for almost everyone, I've seen a decrease in the fears that they have while sleeping as well. Thomas says, hey, I wanted to ask what positions you have at NoCD. You saw a post that you guys are hiring. We are hiring here at NoCD. We're looking for therapists. So if any of you have a great therapist that you know or that you want to send toward us, we'd be more than appreciative because we're looking for more therapists across the country to come and work for us here at NoCD. We are hundreds and hundreds of therapists strong, and we want more. We want to train more people because we want to solve the OCD problem. So if you have a therapist, that's great. And we are also expanding in other areas too. And we're a company that hires people who have OCD. Our CEO is very open about the fact that he has OCD, right? So we value people who have obsessive compulsive disorder. So reach out to us at nocd.com. There's an area on there for what we're looking at for job opportunities and things, and check us out. We'd love to chat with you. Kaylee says, where's everyone at? Well, they're all here now, Kaylee. You wrote that at 7:03 and it is now 7:49. Sorry, we're just getting to that now, but good to see you, Kaylee. Melissa says the app is great. Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate it. Jake says, do you by chance have any careers that you could recommend for someone with just right OCD? Well, Jake, let's look at this two ways. Any career that you would want, you could have with just right OCD. Just like any other kind of OCD, you could have any career that you want to. It isn't about matching a career, I don't think, to the type of OCD you have. It's about finding great treatment for your OCD so that your OCD doesn't influence what you can do in the world and how you live your life. That, I truly believe, is the way that you want to go. So, Jake, my hope for you is that you find a great therapist who can help you learn how to live with your OCD in a way that it's not interfering in your life, and you can have any career that you want whatsoever. Michaela says, can OCD impact mood? The answer is yes, just so you know. It is not uncommon to have people who have OCD also experience some kind of mood disturbance or depression or something like that. That is pretty common. So the answer is yes. And Sometimes therapists say, well, let's get rid of the depression first, and then we'll tackle the OCD. And I look at it the other way around. Depression is often defined in two ways. The first two mandatories, you have to have one or the other of these in order to be meeting criteria for major depressive disorder. You experience feeling depressed, or you've lost interest or pleasure in things you've once enjoyed. Well, what if because of OCD, you've lost interest or pleasure in things that you once enjoyed because the OCD has led you to fear those things, or have doubts about those things, or be disgusted by those things, or have guilt or shame about those things? If getting rid of the OCD got rid of that, maybe your mood would improve. And I've seen that happen all the time. In fact, we did a poster on that once, and that's the way that it works. So, Michaela, I think work on that OCD and watch your mood change. I would truly believe that that's what's going to happen. Melissa says, your therapist has been amazing at OCD so far. Wonderful. So glad to hear that. Guy says, hi, Nicole. You've had the same thing happen with your SOCD as well, too. Ryan says, you have POCD, and every time you go to kiss your fiance, the thoughts say that you're kissing a child. What should I be doing to deal with these thoughts? You try to say that you're with your fiance and safe. So, Ryan, one of the things that you're going to want to watch is if every time that you go to kiss your fiance and that thought pops into your head, or that image or urge or whatever it might be, and then you're repeating to yourself, no, I'm safe, I'm kissing my fiance, that might become a compulsion. It probably is at this point actually a compulsion. So, Ryan, what I want you to do is kiss your fiance, and even if the image or that thought about kissing a kid pops into your head, just continue to kiss your fiance and recognize that just because that thought about a kid is there doesn't mean that you have to do anything about it, and you don't have to make it go away. Now, some of you will say, well, doesn't that mean that then you're accepting the thought? And you know what? The answer is, sure, you can accept any thought. I can accept any thought. I can accept the thought, for example, that I might at some point in time during the next 8 minutes leave this, go outside with a Molotov cocktail, throw it at my neighbor Dave's house, go into the middle of the street, poop in a bag, light it on fire, put it in front of my neighbor Josh's house, ring the doorbell, Josh will come out, step on it, and he'll have poopy fire all over him, and that'll be hysterical. Shoot 3 geese on my way back into my home, and then come back in here and do this webinar. It might happen. And you know what? I'm not going to do any compulsion at all, or try to neutralize it with any other phrase or anything at all whatsoever. Now, you might say, well, I can accept any other thought but this one. This is unacceptable. And that's what OCD knows. And as long as OCD knows that something's unacceptable, then that's the one that it's going to pick on. And that's the one that it's going to bug you with the most. Okay. So there is no such thing as a horrible or bad thought. Thoughts are thoughts. Images are images. Urges are urges. They don't make things happen, and they don't have to say anything about you as a person whatsoever. In fact, there are people who are paid millions of dollars to write horror films about dismembering people and guts and gore and all sorts of things. And we celebrate them, and we give them awards even. Nothing wrong with a thought. So, Ryan, maybe it continues to happen because you keep doing the compulsion. And I want you to work on decreasing the compulsion, Ryan. And I think then you'll start to see a change. Emily asks, any tips on dealing with fear of staring ERP? Oh, well, we've done that one. 2 staring people out there right now. So I hope that the survey helps you. Kaylee says she's recovered from harm OCD, and it gets better. Y'all. Is that y'all or yeah? Or y'all? Yeah, it looks like y'all. Yeah. Kaylee must be Southern. So, because I lived in Mississippi for a while, and I heard a lot of y'all down there, but I grew up in the Chicago area and didn't hear any y'alls whatsoever. Random video game clip says, hey, Doc, you have so much what, and then you got cut off there. So we'll come back to that if there's some more later on. Emily says, does ERP help with false memories as well? What if it doesn't help? Well, there's a what if right there for sure. I mean, so let's just take a look at that. Yes, ERP can absolutely help with false memories, because what we're trying to get people to do is to sit with the fact that I may not have an absolute memory about everything. As far as I know, there's about 30 people in the world who have photographic memories and can tell you, on May 7th, 1942, I was here wearing this, and this was the song that I heard on the radio when this was occurring. And then I went there and I saw my aunt and uncle in their blue Chevrolet, all those kinds of things. Otherwise, None of us have those kind of photographic memories. I couldn't tell you everything I did last week right now, actually. If I, and even with a calendar in front of me, I probably couldn't tell you everything that I did last week either. So if I have OCD might want to say that, well, then how do you know that you didn't go and murder someone, right? How do you know that you didn't do something awful and horrible? How do you know that you didn't push somebody or say something slanderous or something of that nature? Well, I don't believe that I did. It's not in my nature to do those types of things, and I'm just going to have to go with that. Yes, but there was that news report, and how do you know it wasn't you? I mean, maybe it was you, and we can just go on and on and on and on and on. So, Emily, yes, ERP can be very helpful with that, to get people to sit with memories and to recognize that though we may have multiple ways of looking at it and several different interpretations about it, it doesn't have to mean that it's the worst case scenario one that happened. Hope that helps. Guy says, does everyone with OCD count things or have a specific number of times they need to do a compulsion? No. Or can the compulsions be done until it feels just right? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Some people do it to a certain number. Some people do it till it feels just right. Depends on the person. Let's see. Andrea says, I have a friend who has some toxic traits, but I have a lot of relationship OCD with her. Part of me says not being her friend is good because she is toxic, but the other part tells me that it's avoidance. Andrea, I think all of us have been in a situation like that where we have to decide if somebody's going to be a friend to ours or not, and maybe they have some toxic aspects to them or something of that nature. This has probably worked out well through a discussion with a therapist, right? To see where the influence of OCD comes into this. And it is okay, everyone, to decide not to be friends with someone, right? Our OCD may tell us, well, then what a horrible, awful person we are for choosing not to be a friend with someone. I mean, can't we see the redeeming qualities in everybody? And why don't we? And on the other, shoulder, we've got, but maybe there's bad things about them and everything like that. There's people that I'm not friends with anymore, and there's people who aren't friends with me anymore either, who thought maybe bad things about me, or I thought things about them that I just got to a point that I wasn't okay with, and I didn't want to associate with, right? So you may be having a bit of a kind of just discussion in your head about some of these things too, right? Part of you says not being her friend is good, and part of you tells you that it's avoidance. What if it's just we take away the good or the avoidance piece, and we make a decision of, these are the kinds of things that in a person that I don't want to be around. And if this person continues to do those things, and then I don't want to associate with them, then that's why I choose not to associate with them, right? Of course, definitive answers like that are difficult for OCD, because then OCD will doubt everything. Remember, it is the doubting disorder, right? So even if you make a decision like that, then there's going to be doubt on it too. All right. Well, there's a couple other questions here. Bring them back next week, everybody. There are a lot of things to go through, but just so you know, everyone, a couple of good things to think about here. Number one, you don't have to believe everything that OCD says. Number two, OCD's never been great at giving advice, unless it's like worst case scenario bullshit. And number three, OCD's not nice to you, right? And I just want you to think about the way OCD treats me. Would I treat anyone else like that? And if the answer is no, I would never treat anyone else like that. Then I want you to think about, then why am I going to let my OCD treat me like that? I deserve better. And I want to leave all of you with that this week. You all deserve better. And so therefore, keep that in mind, all right? You deserve better than the way OCD treats you. And therefore, don't let OCD be the bully of your life, because you deserve more than that. I hope you have a great week, everybody. My best to all of you. Make it a good one.